Hello and welcome to the First Right podcast, your weekly dose of conservative news brought to you by Restoration of America. I'm your host, Hayden Ludwig, Research Director for Restoration News. You can find our work at restoration-news.com. Today we're joined by Art Del Cueto, Vice President of the National Border Patrol Council, to discuss how Kamala Harris and Joe Biden erased the southern border in the past 4 years. Art Del Cueto, thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
So we go back to January 19th, 2021, the day before Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are sworn in. We still have a southern border with Mexico. Couple days later, the border is opened wide open by executive order, and it hasn't closed a single day since. What have you observed as the fallout from this over the last going on 4 years now in Arizona, but also across the entire border where your agents are operating?
Well, first off, we need to establish how the actual southern border works and who's running the southern border. And that's something that people don't, I guess they don't understand. No matter how hard you explain it, it's still difficult to comprehend. Look, the southern border is run by the drug cartels. That's who runs it. They've utilized, human smuggling over the years so they can, put them in certain areas, and they can manipulate where the agents are working, where law enforcement is at. So what they've continuously done is they're able to send big groups in one area. They know the agents are going to now go to that area. They're going to have to worry about transport, processing, and everything there is. And then they utilize that distraction so they can bring drugs across. So you forward back to right before the Biden administration took over, groups were already, forming on the southern part of the border. So in the Mexican side, you already had these big groups that were, camping out near the line, near the border, specifically out in Arizona, which is a lot more remote than it is in other areas of the border. Arizona is unique because you have just over 60 linear miles with the Mexican border that is on Tohono O'odham Native American tribe land. So there's really nothing on both ends. What they would do is they hover on the Mexican side. The big groups, they gather there, ready to cross. So even before he took over office, the groups were already forming. Now, day one of this administration, and I should say right before they even did they took over office, that they did the inauguration, that same day, you saw large groups in the hundreds already crossing into the United States. I was, obviously able to see one of the groups, talk to one of the individuals. And it was a young boy, about 12, 13 years old. And I asked him why he chose to do it now. He said his parents, or his mom, I should say, had already come to the United States. She was living in Kansas. I asked, well, why are you doing it now? And this is a 12-year-old boy, okay? He looks me right in the eye and he says,
Wow.
Look, I'm doing it now because I can, because your president said I can, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's been the attitude that we've seen from people, as reported from the agency itself. They said they've arrested individuals from over 160 different countries worldwide, and it has been that type of border and that free-for-all since day one of this administration.
So I'm glad you brought up the role of the Mexican drug cartels in this, because there does seem to be a very interesting and dangerous interplay between, let's say, Chinese fentanyl precursors and pill-pushing equipment, for instance, coming from China with the blessing, and the not so secret blessing, I should say, of the Chinese Communist Party. That goes to organizations like the Sinaloa drug cartel, who seem to obviously have a vested interest in encouraging as many people to cross the border going north as they can, as cover for mules, for smuggling in, sex workers, for smuggling in drugs. There's this massive exchange going on here. Were they aware that this is something that Biden and Harris would do when they took office, or did they just take the opportunity and run with it?
No, they know. Look, they're not dumb. I use a lot of the numbers because those are the numbers that are reported by the agency itself. So when I say, over 160 different countries is where the people have been apprehended, that's, DHS numbers. In addition, they've also announced that the Sinaloa cartel works with over 158 different countries around the world. So, that'll give you an idea. It's not like it used to be. And when I say like it used to be, is somebody like me. Look, I was born on the border. I grew up on the border. I've lived here my whole life. I've been, serving the public in different entities and different departments throughout my entire life here in Arizona. So I've been here forever. and it's frustrating sometimes because I see other people that even have joined the agency, they leave or they retire or whatever, and they've had time vested and they got some time in here, so they're aware of what's going on. But I'm not saying I'm the be all end all, but I've been here for nearly 5 decades. Okay, I haven't left. I've been
Yes.
here my whole life. I've seen the different trends, the different way things work, and absolutely, look, the Sinaloa cartel, the drug cartels in general. It's not the mom and pop organizations that you used to see even in the 80s, where they would bring some marijuana across and they would get a couple mules to cross it for. They're a worldwide organization. They have a business sense now. They run their entire operation like a large business, like you'd see large businesses throughout the world that would be run. So that's how
A
they run
Fortune
them. Their
500 company.
children, yes, look, their children have gone to Ivy League schools in the United States. It's not just mom and pop organization, not just a bunch of dumb farmers. These individuals, they know what they're doing. They have a real strong business sense to it, and they've and you know what's different between this organization and a big company that has millions? They don't have a budget. They don't have to worry at the end of the year to do a budget. They just they got so much money coming in, they got so much money going out. So yes, they have utilized these last 4 years as a free for all for them, because every time you see these large groups that come across, and the news is very good in certain areas, especially in Texas. They don't cover as much in Arizona because our governor here and the law enforcement here, it's difficult to get in those areas, which is really upsetting. But you see it in Texas, and you see these large groups that come across. Every time you see these large groups, that's just a distraction for drugs that are coming in right behind them, because they know agents are going to go to that area. We all saw, or I hope the majority of us saw, that big group of 300. Everyone's been talking about it. It's in the news again, saying that maybe some of them were part of the gang El Tren de Aragua, which is from Venezuela. The 300 that came across in El Paso. Everyone, they see it. You can look up the video, and it's shocking to see 300 people storm one area. You know what, though? When that happened, in that weekend alone, there was over 3,000 that entered in southern Arizona. But you don't see those 3,000 because everyone's focused on that. And the Sinaloa cartels, the drug cartels in general, they love that, because they know that one group is going to cooperate with the media and everything else, and that causes that distraction, that extra distraction that they need somewhere else.
You mentioned Katie Hobbs, the wildly controversial Democrat governor, former Secretary of State who was responsible for counting her own ballots for her own election for governor. Of course, that's a different topic altogether. She has probably vetoed more legislation from the Republican legislature than, I would say, any other governor in the union, or very close to that. One of the bills I remember she vetoed, I think it was earlier this year, would have empowered Arizona State Police, so not Border Patrol, but state employees, to arrest anybody who comes across the border illegally at non-entry points or ports of entry like Lukeville, for instance. And the whole idea here is that you have a huge border, but there's only certain places that people are likely to cross. If we funnel them into those places, it makes it easier to patrol. And people entering the country through non-designated ports of entry are probably immediately suspicious, probably work for the drug cartel. I believe neighboring Texas has done this already. Why do the Democrats oppose these kinds of bills? I mean, surely even they don't want their kids dying from fentanyl, one would think anyway.
I think it just doesn't. They don't care. Look, they want to preserve themselves in their elections, and they want to portray a certain bravado, I guess you would say. And it's funny you asked that, because I've really been thinking about this a lot lately. Look, Arizona. There's a lot of Hispanics in Arizona. And they've been promised a lot. And I can say it as a Hispanic. I know people have attacked me sometimes and say, well, what gives you the right? Well, I'm Hispanic, folks. Okay. Now, the reality is there is a lot of Hispanics in Arizona. And when you start looking at it, at the big picture, a lot of the Democrats, especially the radical Democrats in the state, they've done a very good job of making promises to people and making people believe those promises. So they'll sit there and say, well, they're going to do something to us. I speak to the both sides of the aisle, and I've been, trying to focus a lot on speaking to the Latin American community. And I've asked them simple questions. Look, how does Twitter affect your life? And I'm just going to tell you that the majority of these individuals, the large majority, they don't even have Twitter. And I asked him, how does it affect you? Okay, you don't have, it doesn't affect you. Stop listening to the Mexican and Latin American media outlets that what they want to do is sell a certain, point of view, sell their agenda. That way they can get the agenda of their sponsors for their channel so they can broaden and make more money. That's what it comes. So I say, how does the Twitter affect you? It doesn't. Okay, do the gas prices, do you feeling safe at home, to people, bringing drugs into your communities, your kids being affected by gang violence and by drugs in the school system, does that affect you more than what these Latin American media companies are telling you about Twitter? And you know what the answer is. Everyone's like, well, I never thought it that way. They never thought it because they've been brainwashed over so many years to say, these people are bad. These people are racist. These people don't want. Look, I tell them, you came to America and your kids are going to stay in America. They're going to grow up and not want to leave America. And as horrible as it sounds, they're part of the no sabo generation. Those are the Hispanic kids that don't even speak Spanish, okay? And they'll sit there and they'll glamorize the Latin American country that they came from when realistically they're never going to go back. And their kids are never going to go back. So I say, wouldn't you want the country where you're going to stay to flourish? And the vast majority say yes. However, people like Katie Hobbs and other politicians, they have blocked them from being able to listen to those words. They stop them. They say, hey, those people are bad. We're going to help you. We're the only ones that can provide for you and help you. Those people are bad. The Republicans are bad. Donald Trump is horrible. He's a racist. Look what he put on Twitter. Well, they don't have Twitter. They don't care. And I think that's why they do it, because they know as long as they continue to give that false hope to that part of the community, that community continues to follow blindly. Now, I'm not saying that community is dumb. I'm just saying they haven't been properly educated and they've gotten along to get along. And that's where the problem has been.
Well, and probably for the most part, I would hazard a guess that they've never heard from the other side. They don't know maybe that there's another side that actually shares a lot of their same views, that are also Christians, for instance, or Catholics, and view the same things versus, the godless left here. But really what I'm hearing you say is, in fact, Hispanic Americans do want to assimilate into the United States. It doesn't mean you lose everything about the culture you came from, but they do want to be Americans. They want their kids to be Americans and to be better off than they were before. But the left and the Democratic Party don't want them to assimilate for political reasons, for election reasons.
That's exactly it, man. And they continue to feed them, that wrong narrative, because they know that plays into their playbook. And that's where the issue is. And they're going to continue to do that until, enough people wake up, truly wake up, not just to use the hashtag and go into these communities and say, look, let's explain where you were at 4 years ago. Now let's explain where we're at now, because it's been completely chaotic. And I hear the term all the time, every state's a border state. Well, you know what? I think now the states away from the border are worse off than the border states. The border states, sure, they've had to deal with it, but a lot of these groups, they come through the border states and they just keep traveling on. They're not staying at the border states. They're moving into
yes,
other
that's
areas
right.
of the United States. You've seen the issues in Aurora, Colorado. You've seen the issues in Chicago. You've seen the issue, which is, honestly, Chicago's where they first started noting that the El Tren de Aragua, which is this gang affiliation from Venezuela, first started. I remember everyone was, thrown off with the Mara Salvatruchas from El Salvador, and they had all the tattoos all over their faces, and people were intimidated by that. Well, look, you should be more intimidated by the El Tren de Aragua. The Venezuelans, they don't have all those tattoos, so you don't know who they are. They're not out there showing who they are, but they are a lot more dangerous than the Mara Salvatruchas. You would say El Tren de Aragua is the Mara Salvatruchas on steroids and a lot of drugs.
Unreal. Well, the numbers that you've given in your testimony when you testified before Congress in February are incredible. I mean, you've talked about the 1.7 million gotaways that escaped the Border Patrol into the country. That's bigger than the population of Dallas or Phoenix and, of course, a bunch of other American cities here. Clearly, Biden and Harris are not doing anything to stop this, which shocks me considering it is an election year and maybe they don't actually care about legal immigration, but you certainly care about winning re-election. Do you notice Democrats in Arizona who maybe very quietly suggest that actually this is a major problem and not some far-right fantasy that, Trump supporters would have you believe, that actually take the issue seriously?
No, I honestly do, and I talk to everybody throughout the community, and you get a lot of individuals that say, "Oh, yeah, it is a problem." The thing is, we just have to be able to push that narrative out there, and people need to understand it and say, "Hey, all these other things, your border, your home, the drugs, your kids, the future of America. You left another country to come to this country to better yourself." And I'm talking, a lot of it within the Hispanic communities. They need to get the big picture and say all those things affect you a lot more than what one individual has said or you think has said. I'll say that. Or you've been told, he says, on a social media platform. Because you're right. I mean, look, those
Right.
are the actual things that are affecting Americans, not the other thing. And you're right. When you start looking at it and we start spreading the actual word and tell people, look, this administration has been in office for going on 4 years. The first 3.5 years of their term in office, they were saying there wasn't a problem. They ignored it. They
Mm,
didn't care about the problem. You got lives that have been lost in the United States by crimes of illegal immigrants that entered the United States. You got lives that have been lost because of the fentanyl epidemic. When President Trump was in office, there was fentanyl coming into the country, but a lot of it was being stopped and our borders were safer. Back then, a pill was right around $1 for a pill of fentanyl. Under this administration, you're looking at less than 30 cents for a pill. That's an eye
unreal.
opener of how much drugs have been entering into the United States under the current administration. And they've ignored the problem. They just haven't cared. Now they're saying something, and they've provided band-aids, I would say, for an actual bullet wound. That's all they've done. When they come up and they say, hey, well, now we have a policy where we're not going to allow so many individuals, to come across because, it's a mess. When you start looking at that, it doesn't help because you still have the same amount of agents that are stuck in the processing centers. The groups are still coming in. And now, if you look at DHS numbers, they stopped providing the gotaway numbers. You don't see the gotaway numbers anymore
Wow.
because there's no one out there to count the gotaways. So they've removed that number. So now the only number that they'll put out is encounters. And that's why they say the numbers have gone down. Look at the encounters. Well, they're not counting the gotaways anymore because there's no one out there to count them. They're not counting the 30,000 a month that they've been sending directly from Central America into the United States. They're not counting the individuals that have turned themselves into the port of entry. And at the same time, when we go back and talk about these gotaways, this administration has made it extremely easy to come into the United States, ask for asylum, and get released. They know that's what's going to happen. So, how bad could the criminal background be on the close to or not over 2 million gotaways that we've had already in this country?
Well, and let's go back to, you mentioned Band-Aids. That's exactly right. These are not real solutions. The Senate Democrats and the Biden-Harris administration proposed that infamous Senate border deal that came up during the September presidential debate. In fact, when they talk about hiring more Border Patrol agents, it's not to stop people at the border, right? It was to process asylum seekers coming into the country as part of the catch and release program where they're allowed to live here until some uncertain future date when they get a court hearing here. Looking at this, there's absolutely no incentive not to come in, especially with the likelihood that a Republican president running on a massive deportation platform could win in a few months' time. Why wouldn't you want to come north at this point? I mean, is there anything at all this administration has done that's disincentivized people from doing that?
Absolutely nothing. And I'll tell you, look, my organization, the National Border Patrol Council, we stood behind that border bill, and there's been a lot of controversy over that. We stood behind it because we thought it had hopes to move up and actually make amendments and make some proper changes. Now,
Sure.
there's been a lot of back and forth on it. HR 2 is up there. That should have been passed. That's a fantastic bill. I believe that should have gone through. There were some good points within that bill itself. What the MBPC was asking for it to get reviewed. We wanted something on the table. Now, I understand the public, has come back and they said, oh, no, we wanted something on the table. That's what we wanted. We wanted the proper amendments. We wanted that made. Some of the even arguments that came back was like, well, people were arguing about the money that was going overseas. And then, the bill didn't pass. And then a week later, they sent the money overseas anyway. So that's what was frustrating. But, the problem
Yes.
is that HR 2 has been sitting there. It's a bill that's been sitting there. Why haven't they pushed and promoted that bill? That's the actual bill that they should promote. And once again, I call it like it is. I'm a straight shooter, so I know some people would probably come back and comment and say, "Well, that guy's organization backed up the bill." Yeah, we did. I'm not going to deny it, and it was backed up because we had all the hopes in the world that some proper amendments would be made going up. Once enough people, looked at it and said, look, it doesn't matter because we don't want it pushed through, then we were good with it. We understood that. But that was the reasoning for us backing it up when it first came out. I want that to be clear on that one. But you're right. Going back to this administration has done absolutely nothing to help out not just the border issue, but America in general, because when those problems are happening at the border, it's affecting the country as a whole. And the drug cartels, they don't care who the kids or parents are voting for. They just want to introduce drugs into the country and into the schools, as well as a lot of these criminal organizations that have expanded in the U.S. during this administration.
Yeah, Democrats get victimized by illegal alien crimes just as much as Republicans do. There's no doubt about that. It's not truly a partisan issue. It's a shame it is. Okay, so Art, so as we close out here, let's fast forward to it's January 2025. We're looking at a second Trump administration. What would you propose to President Trump? How do we mass deport? How do we close the border? How do we shut down the fentanyl trade coming into this country? Give us some pointers here.
So fortunately, I've been able to speak to President Trump before he was president, while he was president, and during his campaign. Now, I've had the pleasure of speaking with him numerous times. So we've already, we've spoken, we've laid it down on what needs to be done, but he knows, it's going to be a difficult road. He knows what else needs to be done and the extra things. First of all, you got to re-implement remain in Mexico. You got to detain people that are coming across the border, send asylum officers and asylum judges to the actual border so they can do the quick courts and say who's eligible, who's not. That alone is going to drop the numbers, I'm telling you, because there's so many people that are coming in that don't have a claim. Once they realize I'm not going to get released until I prove my claim, that's going to drop the numbers. They're not going to bother coming. They're coming because there's no consequences. Immediately after you do that, you're going to have more agents to be able to put in the field to detain the drug loads that are coming through and stop the fentanyl. And after you start doing that, everybody that gets caught bringing in drugs in the country, they need to be prosecuted. You need to get on these prosecutors and say, there is no more threshold. There is no more, it has to be a certain amount before we prosecute. If you're bringing in drugs into the United States, you will get fully prosecuted. So those are the two things right off the bat that need to be done. And we're going to have to work and try to work with a lot of these other agencies throughout the entire country in order to be able to find the millions upon millions that have been released into the United States under the current administration and get judges to see their cases right away and deport those individuals back. I know people say it's impossible. It's not. It can be done, but it's going to take a group effort. We can't just lay everything at the hands and at the shoulders of President Trump.
Yes. Everything you just described, too, that's something that he can do without Congress. There's so much more that Congress could do when it comes to deporting individuals. But we know, for instance, there's tens of thousands of people who've been arrested by local PD everywhere in every state for committing all sorts of heinous crimes. That's an easy figure to start with right there. What do you think about enforcing E-Verify on employers more effectively?
You could enforce it, but they'd have to enforce it on past claims. Look, I saw E-Verify when it first came into effect, and what they were doing is they were using it on new hires. But if the company had, so many individuals that they had hired for a long time, they weren't verifying those individuals anymore. They were just doing it on new hires. So it made a small dent at that point. You have to expand it if you really want to, if you really want it to work.
Incredible. Well, Art, really appreciate your time. It's been very eye-opening speaking with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And let's just keep spreading the word.
And let me thank you folks for tuning in and supporting conservative voices like Art's, working to expose the truth about the rot spreading through this once great country. Remember that it's only by working together and by praying together that we can restore the United States of America to greatness under Almighty and Sovereign God. I'm Hayden Ludwig. Join us next time as the battle rages on.
First Right, a new kind of news summary without the liberal slant. Every morning, in your inbox, always free. Subscribe by texting First Right to 30161. That's First Right, all caps, one word, to 30161.